Hello, everyone. Today we discuss the concept of privacy, a very relevant topic of our day and age. Privacy. Now, we know privacy was one of the most cherished, valued rights we held here in the United States. We actually enumerated it explicitly in the Constitution, in the Fourth Amendment. I will read briefly a good chunk of that. The Fourth Amendment. It is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath. Now, we held this right dearly to our hearts for more than 200 years here in the United States. A note that it is probably one of the rights that has been most litigated about in the Supreme Court of the United States. But today, in the year 2020, we all own smartphones. And these devices track our most private conversations. And we are under constant surveillance. Whether that's from public entities, such as street cameras, or privately, through devices such as Alexa, the robot that understands our voice, computer cameras. Note that when we're near our laptop or our home computer or on our phone, there are cameras that can monitor us, right? We have remote control voice identifiers, right? So these things are constantly, perpetually tracking us. Now, to understand more of this topic, you can read about Edward Snowden's findings and his findings are based on primary source material. Okay. Now, our phones. Let's start with that. Okay. All phones are constantly doing something. They are connecting and communicating information about you. Okay, all right? The silence of the phone and the invisibility of what it is doing, this fools us to believe that it is a passive device. But in fact, the phone is constantly turned on and it is working. It is working. It is doing something. It is collecting data. It is updating itself, etc. It's collecting information about you as long as it is on. All your apps call this something like updating. But what it is actually doing is collecting data that you have agreed it can have. And when did you agree that it could have this data? Your text messages, your phone records, your voice, your videos, your gallery, etc. When did you agree to this? Well, usually you agreed to this when you accepted the app. And many apps that you've never even used on your phone, right? And these apps are controlled by corporate technology conglomerates. Okay, this data collection is, as far as we know it, this is a permanent record that is stored in a cloud somewhere. And we simply don't know how it is used right now or how this data will be used in the future. Okay, and one question that you can ask yourself is regarding something like your phone is your phone actually turned off? And just because you're not using it, let's understand that your phone is not actually turned off. All right. Many of you may notice that your battery is constantly being used, right? Even when you are not using it. Now, you should ask yourself, how is that possible? I'm not using my phone. It was at 100% battery charge. And now, just an hour later, it's at, 90% charge, right? That is because internally, invisibly, the phone is constantly collecting your data. Okay. Now, if you could, what threats would you want to mitigate, right? Would you want to have your text messages not being able to be accessed? Would you want your videos not to be accessed? Would you want your search history not to be accessed? Okay, what threats would you want to mitigate if you could, right? Another question that I think many of you might want to ask is, why isn't there a way that you can simply shut off these so-called updates and this data collection? Why can't you just press something on your phone that says, you are now being silent. Nothing can go inside of your phone. None of your apps can actually, at this moment, collect any information. Well, the easy answer is that there is no one that is protecting you. The companies themselves are not protecting you, right? The companies exist not to bring you together. Well, that's part of what they're doing, right? Connecting you to friends, or showing you about invites, or telling you about an event that's going to happen, etc. But the reality is that this new business depends on data collection. So they're not going to try to protect you. And, some may ask, well, why isn't our government, why aren't our politicians protecting us from this data? And you can read a lot about this through various sources. But the bottom line is that the politicians and these conglomerate corporations are actually after the same objective, and that is simply power. Power, whether that is economic power or political power, right? An example of this, political power and the invasion of privacy are these bulk collection programs. You can see these programs are well instituted in China. Okay, the example that I'll give to you right now is China's social credit system. And I would have, just 6 months ago, I would have probably spent the bulk of this lecture talking about China's social credit system, right? I would advise you to go learn about that on your own if you want to see how this is developed in other places around the world, right? But I'm not going to spend time doing that right now because we are now in, as I speak to you, this is May of 2020. And here in the United States, we are at the beginning stages of a new, unprecedented bulk data collection program. And the new term that is being used is called tracing, right? And in a nutshell, this idea of tracing is justified. We're being told it's justified. And I think, based on what many would regard as a common sense, as far as health is concerned, right? Society's health is concerned. This tracing is justified because we are in the COVID-19 pandemic. And the justifiable reason for this right now is to keep us healthy and safe, right? And so they're saying, hey, you know what? We're gonna Google, Facebook. They are developing technology and they are giving it, selling it in partnership with the government so that they can trace who has the sickness, who's likely to have the sickness, if someone gets sick, if someone, tests positive for COVID-19, these programs will be able to quickly see who these people were in contact with and probably quarantine those people, right? And so that would keep the devastation of COVID-19, the pandemic, the deaths, the sickness, etc., that would keep the numbers down, right? Okay. Now, Snowden gives the Patriot Act as an example of what happens when these crises end, right? Okay. So for right now, there's a justifiable reason, to track us, right? Okay. To get mass surveillance, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic, right? But what happens when that crisis is over? Snowden argues that state of surveillance never ends. The Patriot Act is an example. I will read to you a bit about the USA Patriot Act, which officially stands for the Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act. And this was quickly developed as anti-terrorism legislation in response to the September 11th 2001 attacks, right? And people were scared, people were in crisis, people were confused, and Congress passed this quickly, right? Now, another scholar, her name is Naomi Klein. She would call this an example of the shock doctrine or disaster capitalism. And this is when governments and other forces use a disaster to violate our constitutional rights, and then simply the violation becomes the norm. People forget that we agreed to this for a specific reason, and then it just becomes normal. And the government becomes used to invading our privacy, and nobody is fighting back anymore. Going back to the use of the smartphone, just want to summarize here. We have no idea what our smartphones are doing in our pockets. while we're not even using them, and we have no idea what these smartphones are doing while we are asleep. Okay? Why don't we have a button to stop this communication? Especially when we are the ones who pay for these devices, right? We pay $500 for a phone, right? Shouldn't we have some kind of control over this device? We pay taxes and finance all of this experimentation. Yet we have no voice in this fight right now, right? A big question, and one that I cannot answer in this video, is how do we pull the reins back? How do we get this out of control horse back in control when we have given up so much already? Okay, and there have proven to be intentional concealment of data, mass surveillance, and bulk collection, right? Once again, read more about Edward Snowden. And something that I would advise to do is look at some of his look at some of the historical news about Snowden and what he found more than 6 years ago, but also look at some of his recent theories, especially as it relates to COVID-19 and privacy. Now, some of you may be questioning, right? How is this legal, right? When at the beginning of this video, I read for you the Fourth Amendment, right? And this seems like this would be all of this that I've just relayed to you, all of this seems like an unreasonable search and seizure that you did not agree to, right? And that your Fourth Amendment is being violated. No one has a warrant right now to look in your phone, right? And what is the rationale for why this is all legal? I will summarize it here. You agreed to it. You agreed to it. Since you agreed to it, therefore it is legal, right? So let's understand. You might say, this sounds crazy. I didn't agree to all this. And technically you did. Technically you bought the phone, right? And in order to make a phone call, you agreed to a bunch of contract stipulations. And I'm sure it's a contract that you have never read, right? What's the rationale for why all of that data needs to be collected, right? You can question that on your own, right? But I just want to get into the reality. The argument, the cliche argument, is that you agreed to a violation of your own invasion of privacy. Therefore, the companies are not breaking the law. You have consented to them, right? Okay? Even though, as I just said a moment ago, right? Even though you never imagined that they were going to do this, right? And it's almost like they have, to a certain extent, a gun to your head. Okay, I know that is somewhat of an imperfect analogy, right? But no, how else are you going to make a phone call? How else are you going to communicate to go pick your kid up from school, or to go meet a friend at lunch, or to contact your employer, right? That you're going to be late. Right? How are you going to do that? You have to use your phone, right? There are no pay phones out there anymore, right? And so you have to use the device, And these companies put in a bunch of stipulations. And once you agree to the contract, you have consented to have them invade your privacy. And the companies argue, we're not breaking any laws. She agreed to it, right? In fact, the corporations and political forces have a common interest in this data collection. And that common interest is power, whether that is political power or economic power. Have a great day. Goodbye.